Welcome to Annapolis Mosaics. Our program spotlights people in our community who are involved in activities designed to foster good human relations. I am Michael Keller, the chair of the Annapolis Human Relations Commission, a city board that focuses on enhancing equal opportunity and eliminating discrimination. My guest today is Barbara Thomas, the clerk of the Annapolis Friends Meeting. Barbara, thank you for joining us today on Annapolis Mosaics.
I'm delighted to be here, Mike. Thank you for asking me.
Barbara, it is my understanding that the Annapolis Friends have established a Peace and Justice Center. Could you share with our viewers the reasons that the Friends created this entity and what motivated them to bring it about at this time?
Okay, thanks. Good question. We wonder sometimes. About a year ago, a few of us were sitting at the picnic table in the backyard of our meeting house under a tree and wondering what more could we do as a corporate body than we're doing now. We're a small meeting. We're about 65 members now, and that's been growing for the last 20 years, and we felt like we were at a place where we can do more than just individual help. And we were kind of looking introspectively, what gifts do we have? What do we bring as a tradition of one of the many churches? We call it a meeting among the Quakers with the same idea in the Annapolis area. And we thought, well, the two key testimonies or guidances that we have that we thought would fit into Annapolis's needs right now are the peace testimony and the equality testimony. And by peace, we're not talking about just being against wars. We're talking about what are the key things that can remove the occasion for war. What are the ways that people can turn conflict into cooperation? And then with the equality testimony, that's where we get the Peace and Justice Center. Very important that we look at the social issues, that we not just smile and hope everyone is peaceful and lives in harmony ever after, but what are the key things that need addressing? So we began to talk about what we could do, and we came up with some ideas.
What are those ideas?
Really, there are three areas right now. One is youth empowerment. One is, just by happenstance, addressing water rights issues in the Israeli-Palestinian situation. And the third is becoming active in one of the housing areas in Annapolis to see if we can do more, really partnering, befriending a local community that needs a little more help than others might.
Yeah, you talked about youth empowerment and the youth ventures activity. Could you give us a little bit more information about that?
Yeah, that's really taking off right now, and we're excited about it. Two things. Youth Venture is an outfit that's headquartered over in Arlington, Virginia, and it's under the umbrella of a group called Ashoka. And their quest in life is to find people with good ideas. In the case of Youth Venture, it's youth with good ideas that want to address community problems and really support them in formulating their idea and in implementing it. And they'll give small teams of youth up to $1,000 to implement a sustainable idea. So we got the director of Youth Venture over to Annapolis to talk about it, and a few people showed up and got interested, and we built, and then they had the Dream It, Do It workshop, they call it. And that workshop, I guess it was late April, maybe it was early May. About 20 kids showed up at the Bates Boys and Girls Club who've been partnering with us on this and began to consider the ideas that they could bring forward this summer to address some of the problems that they see in Annapolis. And as I understand it, one of the ideas is now fairly well formed and is going to the selection panel, I think, and the others are forming. They have to fill out action plans, they learn teamwork, they learn leadership skills, and we really hope, Youth Venture says that they will fund as many ideas as make it through the different stages of development. So that's one, that's Youth Venture. And the second one, Youth Empowerment, is called the Help Increase the Peace Program. And the short form, the acronym is HIP. And the HIP program is, it's a program that, it's a lot of fun. It's directed at youth. It's full of games and discussions and role plays and things of that sort that address both conflict resolution on the interpersonal level, things that kids might be facing in just their daily interactions with other youth or with adults, and on the social level, issues of social justice and that sort of thing. We took it, the Boys and Girls Club have been great in helping us out with this, and we have two programs planned for this summer through the Boys and Girls Club. We're providing the facilitators, and we've gotten 2 grants to be able to do it. While we were talking with them, they said, well, why don't you just train our whole staff while you're at it? We thought, well, so we began to talk about that, and we thought, well, they would probably be bored with 15 hours of HIP since they're adults, so we decided we would do it a little bit differently. And we had 3 half days of introduction to interpersonal conflict resolution skills, to restorative justice, and to HIP. And they liked the HIP program. 6 people of the 15 who were there in the staff training came forward afterwards and said, we want to be trained as trainers. And now the Light of the World Family Ministries has asked for their entire First Offenders program to be switched over to use the HIP program curriculum instead of what they had been using in the past, because they thought it would really address some of the problems better. So we feel like by the end of this summer, we might have possibly 10 full trainers, Annapolis-based individuals who can be facilitators of HIP. And that was our dream, because the 2 that are going to do the summer's program, we've had to import from other towns and actually other states.
Where do you see the HIP program going and the Youth Ventures program going down the road as you envision this? This sounds like to be a very exciting project.
We mostly want to throw it out there and let people take it up and do with it as they will. We aren't going to try to keep any reins on either one. The more people who get interested and start making individual contacts with Youth Venture, or get trained as HIP facilitators and take it out on their own, more power to them. That's what we're hoping will happen, and that it will just multiply on its own.
What kinds of issues and problems within the city of Annapolis do you see being addressed by the HIP program and by the Youth Ventures program?
It's been interesting. We decided early on last summer, when we were trying to figure out, well, what are the gaps in areas of service and need in Annapolis that we might be able to address. And we felt like we were on a learning curve trying to figure that out. And along came a flyer that said, come to this meeting on Stop the Violence in Annapolis. So a couple of us showed up at that meeting, and that was sponsored by Light of the World Family Ministries. And when I met Pastor Cheryl Menendez, we realized that the 2 of us had something going that we could do together, and they have been tremendously helpful in helping us expand our contacts and the pool of people who might be interested in these kinds of programs, along with the Boys and Girls Club. I mean, we had the idea, but we didn't know the people that we could take it to, and I think through those 2 venues we've been able to get a start.
What has been the reaction of the youth that have been involved in these programs? How are they reacting to it? What have you learned as a result of some of your initial efforts?
You know, really, it's the youth step that's just coming up. We train the staff at the Boys and Girls Club, and we've talked with some of the staff at Light of the World. The youth HIP program will start in early July. And the Youth Venture group, I've only had the opportunity to be there for the very first day when those 20 kids came in, and it was fascinating to me to watch them because they were kind of all slumped over and looking like, I'm bored here and what do you have to offer me? And as these two great folks from Youth Ventures started talking, they started perking up and they started thinking of ideas and they started thinking of what they could do in their community, and they couldn't believe it at first. They said, you mean that we would really do it ourselves? You mean you would give us $1,000? Will the adults run this? And they said, no, well, you can have one adult ally, but you've got to run it yourself. I feel like it taps into the creative potential of the human spirit, and I just hope it flies.
So this is really an effort at empowerment, empowering young people to take responsibility and to take the initiative to improve relations.
I think so. We hope so.
You'd also mentioned some other projects that the Peace and Justice Center was going to focus on. You mentioned one that dealt with housing, I believe.
That's right.
Talk a little bit about that, if you would, Barbara.
Thank you. We're really piggybacking on an idea that came from the Stop the Violence movement through Light of the World, and that was they challenged every church and every civic organization to partner and work together with one of the at-risk communities in Annapolis. And we ended up partnering with the Boys and Girls Club around Admiral Oaks. And and we haven't started that yet. We've met with the Boys and Girls Club. We've got 2 leaders from Annapolis Friends Meeting who will spearhead that effort. The Boys and Girls Club are going to be opening up a computer center and another general recreation area. And we hope to help all we can initially in their efforts to get those 2 things running. We're looking for skills that we might have to offer there. I understand they need evaluation, they need grant writing. Those are things we can help with. Transportation of the kids from Admiral Oaks to Bates Boys and Girls Club, and someone just running that computer center to help the adults during the daytime, for example, do career search, etc.
What do you see as the potential for this project in terms of helping people in Annapolis?
For the Admiral Oaks housing?
Yes.
Well, this is going to be going on in creative ways with every group that signed up, and I'm just fascinated. I hope that the groups will get together and sort of share ideas of what each one is doing. And those who get a little bit stuck might be helped out by some of the ideas of the others. We really haven't gotten our introductions into Admiral Oaks at all yet, so we're looking forward to that happening. And we just want to stay open and listen and be able to respond appropriately when we see the needs that come up.
We're going to take a break now, but when we come back, I'll be asking Barbara about the initiative on that the Friends program has on the planned water rights conference between Israelis and Palestinians. We are talking to Barbara Thomas, the clerk of the Annapolis Friends Meeting, on our program Annapolis Mosaics. Barbara, you had been talking about the initiatives that the Annapolis Friends Meeting have made with respect to its newly created Peace and Justice Center. One of those that you had mentioned is an activity which involves the planned water rights conference between Israelis and Palestinians. I think our viewers would like to hear about that. When people think about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, water is not an issue which ordinarily comes to the fore. But in fact, isn't it a very integral part of the dispute that divides the Israelis and Palestinians? And as part of the Peace and Justice Center, what are you guys going to do?
We are just fascinated that we have been able to come to this point where it looks like in mid-August we will have about 6 Palestinians and 6 Israelis flying over to Annapolis from their home countries to really try to reach agreement on water rights in their area. The background to this, if I can just tell you a little bit, when the Annapolis Peace Conference happened in November, some of the men in our meeting were chatting about, well, this is an opportunity to do what they call think globally and act locally, and is there something that we can do in support of this? I mean, there's nothing we'd rather see than peace in the Middle East. And so one of the members of that group started researching something called the Geneva Accord and the Geneva Initiative.
Yes.
And learned that from 2000 to 2003 or somewhere during this time, in Geneva, representatives of both governments really worked on a lot of the small detail issues that were separating them. And they created an accord on a lot of those issues, and there were several outstanding issues that they could not come to conclusion on and that their governments were not able to agree on. And refugee situation, a couple of others, and water rights was one of those. And it happened that this particular member of our meeting's brother is a water rights lawyer. And so December, January, February, they started talking about, well, and researching and studying, and well, what are the discussions going on about this? And where are the agreements at this point? And what is the willingness? And what are the issues that still need to be addressed? And they found that almost nothing was happening. And that the two teams, they now call it the Geneva Initiative. When they came back from Geneva in 2003, they started grassroots teams of Palestinians and Israelis who would go together to schools and to civic organizations, etc., and talk about the positive accords that they have already made and their hopes for positive accord for the issues that are still outlying. So they began this member of ours began to speak with Geneva Initiative folks. It flew 2 of them over in November, who they had a session at St. Anne's Church. They lent us space because we're rather a small meeting house and a bit out of the way. And we filled it with people who wanted to know more about how to make peace in Palestine and Israel. The issue then was not water rights, it was just general, and they briefed us, and Mayor Moyer met with them, took them out to dinner one day, and they began to cook up all kinds of plans. Maybe we could be a sister city with one town in each country. That didn't work out, but what has begun to work out is this water rights issues negotiation. And so we are real excited. Each team, when I say team, I mean Geneva Initiative team in Israel and in Palestine, has selected its own members. They're hydrologists, engineers, politicians, communication experts, a whole variety of people, a map specialist who would be able to address the concrete issues of water flow and infrastructure that would need to be built, and the political problems, obstacles that would stop such an accord from going through. And as we speak, They are working on those plans together right now. Why Annapolis? Why fly them all the way over here? What they feel like is they can't meet in the territory of either one of the two. And we've gotten several experts in the field who are willing to come down and lend their expertise to guide them in this sort of final agreement. We hope it can be a final agreement. We've also just been delighted to get Ambassador John McDonald, who runs an outfit called International Multi-Track Diplomacy. And he and his team are going to lead the mediation and the facilitation of it. So there'll be about, we think, 3 or 4 experts in the field, along with 2 facilitators, and then approximately 6 on each team, coming to Annapolis in mid-August to try to reach this agreement.
Many individuals are familiar with various features of the dispute between Israelis and Palestinians, specifically the issue of attacks on civilians, the issue of settlements and occupation, the issue of so-called right to return, the issue of the refugees, which you made reference to, and also the status of Jerusalem. But almost nowhere do you read about the issue of water rights. Explain a little bit about why water is so important. It may not be an issue that has grasped the public's attention, but it's obviously very important to these two sides. Why is water such a critical issue, and why have they had the difficulty reaching agreement on this?
Yeah. I wish I were an expert in this field. One thing that we have decided is that in the next 2 months, building up to this conference, everybody in Annapolis Friends meeting needs to go on a learning curve and learn more about all the issues, and particularly this one. A couple of people in our meeting have gotten up to speed on it and have learned that of all the issues, this is one where we have a couple of people with some expertise, and unfortunately I'm not one of them. And consequently, here's the place where we can say, let us help if we can. They are expecting a drought in the Middle East this summer that's going to be worse than anything that they have experienced in years. This is the prediction. And obviously, it's a desert area, and it's very difficult to share the water among a growing population. As I understand it, Israel has done a lot with desalinization, and they have put some hope in that, but then others who know more about the technology of fresh water are saying that that can be expensive and that there are other ways too. I heard a gentleman speak recently who's from the Negev area in southern Israel.
Yes.
And a desert area which has many Palestinians living there, although they are Israeli citizens. And they too, it's not just the Palestinian territories, are facing huge issues with clean, fresh water, adequate supplies. So we feel like it's something that we can help with. We literally are just facilitating. They will make the decisions. They will do what they can do together to take it as far as they can take it. And then afterwards, we're not going to, this might be the only time that Annapolis knows about this, because we're not going to do much media around it. We feel like it's not appropriate. It's a time where they need to speak with one another about the issues without a lot of clamor, no high hopes. We're not bringing the U.S. government into it. We're not bringing any governments into it. We're trying to hold the space for those negotiators to find both the technology and the willingness within themselves to reach an accord on this one among many issues. So we'll let you know in late August if they reach an accord or not. They will, even before we announce what that is, they will need to take it back to their own governments and get approval. And then we would go to an international donors conference and see if we can get some help with the infrastructure that would be involved in this.
Barbara, if any of our viewers are interested in learning more about the Annapolis Friends Meeting's new Peace and Justice Center and some of the activities that you discussed here, how can they get in touch with you?
The best thing would be to go to our website, which is quaker.org/Annapolis. And there we will have information about the Peace and Justice Center and about many other things concerning Annapolis Quakers and what we're doing.
We've been talking today with Barbara Thomas, who's the clerk of the Annapolis Friends Meeting. I'd like to thank you again, Barbara, for being on our show today. And I'd like to thank our viewers for tuning in to our program, and urge them to join us again for another edition of Annapolis Mosaics. If you would like to have more information about the Annapolis Human Relations Commission, simply jot down the contact information that appears on the screen. You can phone us at 410-263-7998 or email us at hrcommission@annapolis.gov. And remember the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who said, "We have flown the skies like birds and swum the seas like fish, but have yet to learn to walk the earth like brothers and sisters."